Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Conant Show. Today is Wednesday, I'm never good at...
23rd, I think.
Yeah, I think it's the 23rd. Even Paula's not sure what day it is. Where's my phone? I didn't even have my phone on me. Okay, so...
That's a good thing.
Yeah, 23rd of May, 2018, 7 o'clock. And, it's... kind of nice that we have a little bit of nice weather going on out there for a change. It's nice rain we had, and now the sun's out, and everything's finally leafed out. And I still had to make a fire last night, kind of chilly. But I have this real interesting document here. Apparently, it's from the State Justice Institute, and the date of it is May 12, 2003, and its main title here is Judges Being Secretly Trained to Resist Arguments Based on Constitution. So, I'm going to read it. It's a short document. It's a nice way to get our evening started here. It's not that short. Okay, but it's short enough. All right, so it goes like this. Fearful of growing backlash from the public against arbitrary, prejudiced, and even malicious judgments that are protected by judicial immunity, judges have banded together under government sponsorship to devise means of defending themselves from aggrieved and increasingly militant pro se litigants. I'm not sure I like the word militant, but whatever.
I know.
I don't know what that even means in this context. I guess, people really just sort of want to set things right and they don't like it. It doesn't sound militant to me. It sounds like they want justice. Continuing Education Credit Prejudices Judges by June Winooski. I'm going to try that again. By June Winooski. This is a strange name. Wisniewski. Wisniewski is how I would guess that. No offense, June. Doing my best here. All right. The Anti-Government Movement Handbook is a training manual for judges and court staff against pro se litigants, published in 1999 by the National Center for the State Courts in Williamsburg, Virginia. This book, along with Dealing with Common Law Courts, a model curriculum for judges and court staff, published in 1997 by NCSC, was developed from an Institute for Course Management, the ICM, course on dealing with common law courts held in Scottsdale, Arizona, February 5 through 7, 1997. The curriculum and manuals for this course were prepared with a grant from the State Justice Institute, award number SJI-96-02B-B-159. The Rise of Common Law Courts in the United States, an examination of the movement, the potential impact on the judiciary, and how the states could respond. Boy, that's some careful language in there, isn't it?
Yeah.
The State Justice Institute is a nonprofit 501c3 corporation that was started in 1986 and funded by Congress to develop courses and training manuals for state courts and judicial training organizations. This course and training manuals were developed by a group of 27 judges, court clerks, and court administrators, and prosecutors in Arizona who examined the history and procedures of the common law court movement and created the training curriculum and responses that courts, judges, and court administrators can use when dealing with the common law courts in their own jurisdiction. My contact at the conference said that one of its goals was to identify ways the courts can make preemptive strikes against the common law court movement. Some of the keynote speakers who helped produce the common law court course in Arizona were Chief Justice Thomas Moyer of Columbus, Ohio, T.C. Brown of Columbus, Ohio, a reporter for the Cleveland Plain Dealer, and Jonathan Mozacci, Executive Director, the Coalition for Human Dignity in Seattle, Washington. Mozacci, who distributed Guns and Gavels, a publication of the Coalition, was listed as a, quote, nationally recognized expert on militias and hate group activity, end quote. The Coalition is like a West Coast version of the Southern Poverty Law Center. I originally found...
Do you know what that is, the Southern Poverty Law Center?
Not exactly. I mean, I know that there were a legal group that sometimes the advertising for the Southern Poverty Law, what was that, Center, was that they were like a civil rights watchdog group. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what they're supposed to be. But read on.
Okay, all right, moving right along. I originally found out that about this course by watching a videotaped session of the 1996 combined conference of the Conference of Chief Justices, CCI, Conference of Chief Justices, and the Conference of State Court Administrators, held in Nashville. And that is the looks like COSCA is what they're calling that. There's a lot of acronyms here for me to deal with. Sorry, folks.
Yeah.
Held in Nashville, Tennessee, in the summer of 1996, called, quote, yes?
That's the one that it's May 23rd that we're making this now, and that's the one that's going to play after your show. It wasn't until I read that carefully that I realized it was shot in Nashville, Tennessee, because it was handed to us by the brother of Rod Class, and he wasn't sure where it came from. But I'm positive because of all the people that are mentioned. And I think a lot of people, when they first listen to it, they're going to think, oh, Nazis aren't good. And, I'm not saying Nazis are good, but it's got layers of meaning. And Joe introduces it, and he says, really what's happening is these judges are coming together, and they're committing treason. They're conspiring to work against the interests of the people. And this happened at a time of, you'll see as you read on about the foreclosures. If people wonder about the factory farms, how come we have these cruel, big, horrible factory farms? It's because the small farmers were swindled out of their property by New York gangster types, Wall Street types.
Yeah, okay, so this is... stepping back a second here, judges being secretly trained to resist arguments based on the Constitution. And the date of this publication is May 12, 2003. And we are now looking at some conferences that happened in the 1990s in this article by June Wisniewski. Okay. The impact, quote, called The Impact of the Common Law Court Movement on the Courts, end quote. More than 50 state Supreme Court justices and state court administrators attended the Tennessee conference. The CLC session was taped with a grant from the SJI. Let's see, was that... Again, I have to kind of go back and see what that means again.
I know it took me a long time to learn all of those.
State Justice Institute. Okay,
Yeah.
that's the SJI is the State Justice Institute. Made the grant, and keynote speakers were Michael Reynolds, Senior Intelligence Analyst for the Southern Poverty Law Center. Okay, I'm getting them.
AKA CIA, I think.
Yeah. And James Reynolds. Ooh, look at that. Michael Reynolds and James Reynolds, Chief of the Terrorism and Violent Crime Section, U.S. Department of Justice. The panel discussion included Susan Hansen, senior reporter with the American Lawyer, Ohio Supreme Court, with the American Lawyer. Okay, that must be a magazine with American Lawyer. Very good. Okay, Ohio Supreme Court Chief Justice Thomas Moyer, past president of the CCJ. Utah Supreme Court Justice Michael Zimmerman and Judges Jeffrey Langton and Gregory Moore from Montana. The taped session was more than 3 hours long. At the end of the session, one of the speakers mentioned that there was funding for additional CLC conferences. Now, the CLC again is common law courts. Okay, so they're really going after the common law here, which is the foundation of our Constitution, folks.
Yeah.
I immediately called ICM. Now, who are they? ICM. I don't see that acronym in previous.
I think it's at the very beginning. I remember.
All right, let's go back here.
Being stumped on.
All right, yes. Institute for Court Management.
Yeah.
ICM.
Yeah.
Institute of Court Management, located at NCSC in Virginia. All right, so who are they again?
Let's see. NCSC, that's the National Center for the State Courts.
There you go.
He seems to say that the NCSC and the NJC, National Judicial College, are some of the most threatening to our Constitution.
Our Constitution, very good. And asked about the additional CLC conferences. My contact told me that a Scottsdale conference was going to take place in about 3 days. Since those two conferences, there have been additional conferences sponsored by the State Judicial Institute, SJI, or is that State Justice Institute? Gotta go back and. Boy, this is a really.
It'll flow a little
Yep,
easier.
State Justice Institute, very good.
Yeah.
With other organizations. The State Justice Institute sponsored a conference with the American Judicature Society in Scottsdale, Arizona, in November 1999 that was closed to the public and the press. There will also be an ICM course in Orlando, Florida, February 5 to 7, 2001, called Increasing Access to Justice for Pro Se Litigants. With that organization's perception of what access
is,
means.
Yeah.
Okay. I got to go back to ICM here. Who are they again?
Oh, that's
Institute
of Court Management.
of Court Management. Very good. All right.
Yeah.
Constitutionalists in Court was held in the St. Paul, Minneapolis, Minnesota area in the summer of 2000 by the National Justice College, NJC, of Reno, Nevada. And the same course was held again November 13 and 14, 2000, also at the National Justice College in Reno. The course discusses the history of protest movements affecting the judiciary, identifies typical challenges and ways to handle them, anticipates courtroom security needs, and plans solutions and strategies. The National Judicial College, together with the University of Nevada, Reno, conducted a survey, developed material for their courses from state SJI again, the State Justice Institute, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, materials and grants, and published a brief report called, quote, Right-Wing Extremist Challenges to the Authority and Jurisdiction of the Court, end quote, in 1998. This course and report contains a preemptive plan against pro se litigants and others who may disagree with the court, including the American Civil Liberties Union, Native American protest groups, religious organizations, and anyone else who may take issue with a court decision. The information from the NJC, now that must be the National...
Just a second. Before you slide by that one, notice the religious organization.
I see that.
Last week you were asking me about the forays I'm making into the different religious organizations here in Woodstock.
I do.
I think that a lot of people, and myself included, are very spiritually inclined. And you think that to put your attention on anything, evil or material is going to diminish your vibes. Your good vibes are going to go down. But on the other hand, when you've got so much mischief afoot, I often think of you talking about your father, the battlefield general, saying that an army runs on its stomach.
Yeah.
Think of when you say this State Justice Institute, you hear state this and state that and court management. Think in terms of corporations, and they're all about making profits for their shareholders. So they have to occupy, and then, the supply chain dries up. And if the army that's running on its stomach runs out of food, where do you think they're going to get the food? They're going to get it from wherever they're occupying. You see? So
as Napoleon found out, going into Russia and trying to winter over, caused him to suffer the largest military attrition loss in the history books, as far as I understand it. He had quite a military expedition up there, over 100,000 men, more than 100,000 men. I'm not sure, but he came back with only 8 to 10% of them alive, and
right.
that's what got him in trouble with the French public. That's what I believe is what got him exiled for a few years, and then they had him come back and do some more shenanigans.
Right.
But they ran out of food and they all froze.
Right. So my point was, even though you seem to be reading about court stuff, it's really sort of creating a theater and hiding what's really going on. And that's why the Constitution and due process is so important, because if you really believe that a free society is going to be the most prosperous society and not a society where you've got a bunch of a free-for-all for the biggest bully, always grabbing and taking, and people living in fear of what they're creating being taken away, then you should pay attention. So as you read on, I'll tell you what I'm doing with the library.
Okay, so the information from the NJC is so controversial that the NJC has banned its course and conference materials from the public. But their library and the SJI repository is open to the public. I originally started researching judicial training organizations in 1996 after I was denied the inheritance by the New Jersey court system when my parents died, and was also denied entrance to a conference and a course materials at NJC in May 1996 called, quote, the National Conference on the Media and the Courts, working together to serve the American people, end quote. The media conference was closed to the public. Only one New Jersey judge, Martin Kraverick, attended that conference. Judge Kraverick was elected president of the American Judges Association, a judges organization under NCSC and AJA, publishes a quarterly journal called Court Review, available in your local law library by subscription or through interlibrary loan. I first found out about the judicial movement against pro se litigants and the common law court movement by reading Kreverik's, quote, President's Message, end quote, in the fall 1996 issue of Court Review. I called Judge Kreverik for more information on what the common law court movement was all about, and he gave me some additional contact information. I called Mike Reynolds of SPLC, which I'm not sure what that is now at this point because there's so many acronyms, and told me there were 4 conference proceedings and that the conference was taped. I waited over 3 months to get a copy of the tape, quote, Impact of the Common Law Movement on the Courts, end quote. That tape is available through interlibrary loan from NCSC along with the training manuals mentioned above. Each state has an SJI repository for all publications put out by the organizations they have funded. For example, the repository in Nevada is at National Justice Center, I guess, NJC, in Reno. In New Jersey, the SJI repository is in the New Jersey State Library in Trenton. You can check out these training manuals with a New Jersey library card. You can also find out where your SJI repository is by looking it up on the internet at www.statejustice.org, by calling SJI at 703-684-6100, or by writing to the State Justice Institute, 1650 King Street, Alexandria, Virginia, 22314. SJI is funded
just a second. Before you go on that one, that explains that they're getting federally funded public money, right? So if there's federal money that's being collected in the name of a country that goes by the Constitution, they have to make it available to the public. So that's why some of these things I'm trying to order through the library, and I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, I spent the day, probably about 4 or 5 hours yesterday at the Kingston Superior Court Library, and I noticed court review manuals or compendiums on the top shelves above where I was looking for civil law practice in New York. So yeah, it looks like some of these publications might even be right here in Kingston's Superior Court Library.
Oh, well, if that's the case, then the interlibrary exchange, then our Woodstock Library should be able to get it. But read on them.
All right. So SJI is funded by Congress with your tax dollars. If you don't like the courses and materials they are funding, you can write to your senator or congressman or directly to SJI and ask them to stop funding these materials. SJI gets very few letters from the public, and I'm sure they would love to hear from you. When you get to their website, read and download the newsletters. Most of their new grants are in their newsletters. The National Center for State Courts is an umbrella organization for several organizations such as the National College of Probate Judges, NCPJ, AJA, CCJ, COSCA, and ICM, and others. Boy, that's a lot of acronyms in one sentence, huh? I have been a member of the NCPJ since 1996, and I have attended 4 judges' conferences. The most controversial and harmful material against the public is coming from the NJC and NCSC materials, 2 agencies that compete with each other for SJI and federal government funding. In the training manuals mentioned above, There are 2 sections in each book where the writers advise judges and court personnel, such as court clerks and guards, on how to handle pro se litigants using step-by-step process. The writers of these manuals reveal a court that is biased and has a dangerous point of view about justice and equal access in the court system. Copyright 2001, June Wisniewski. The author, Jane Wisniewski, is a legal researcher and journalist in Reno, Nevada, who can be reached at Reno June at judicialterrorism.com.
I tried to write her, email her today.
Okay,
let's see if it works.
To spell that out for you folks is all one word. RENOJUNE at JUDICIALTERRORISM.com. All right, Reno June at judicialterrorism.com. She has written a number of articles on judicial subjects and is the author of a book, The Coffin Chasers, An Aggrieved Litigant's Journey Through the Corrupt World of Probate. This article appeared in the January 5, 2001 issue of the Idaho Observer and is reprinted here with knowledge of the author. Its subject matter is the basis of another book, Unequal Justice, the Inside Story of the National Judicial College. Okie dokes. So.
Can I make a few comments? Do you have comments first?
Sure. Let's
okay. I gain a lot when I listen to you and I do this tech work and think about other people out there in Woodstock, you know, that might be caring and listening. And I'd like, with your permission, to read the letter to Catherine O'Hagan Wolf. Can I read that?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. May 23rd, Catherine O'Hagan Wolf is the clerk of court at the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. Now, this is a very important federal court. The Second Circuit is what should be handling the bank bailouts and the fraud that's going on. It's at 40 Foley Square. Dear Catherine, thank you. I figure I'm an elder now, so I can be addressed as Paula, and I'll address other people in their real woman capacity, because we have to put our heads together to see if we can make connections beyond a lot of the theater that's going on and the distraction. Thank you for your letter of May 7th. And this is a case about public access. This was the case that a lot of you viewers are aware. Lydia Radin was nearly beaten to death by a so-called federal officer at 500 Pearl Street, January 28, 2016, when she witnessed an email intervention of mine because I had a federal right to intervene as the outcome of the case would affect me and other public access producers similarly situated. So it turns out she was beaten up not by a federal officer, but by somebody impersonating a federal officer, something called intercon security. And since 2016, up until the present, she's been doing a deep analysis of what's going on in the courts and how they get away with these things. But nevertheless, the content of that intervention was not only saying that I and others were public access producers. I actually had an email that was forwarded, which I forwarded on, from the Manhattan Borough President's Chief of Staff, Jessica Mates. So the email was not only my motion to intervene, the email itself was evidence that there was state actor involvement. And it was stricken from the record unlawfully. That means when you strike something from the record legally and lawfully, you put a line through it. You strike it so that if there's any problem and it needs to be appealed at the appellate court, they can take a look at the full record. Even though it was like deleted and unlawfully, just they tried to poof it out, they really couldn't because it was mentioned in the transcripts. Later on, Dean Lauren was accused of trying to take a second bite of the litigation apple. So they were chastising him for this email that was actually mine. So you can see that once you start to mess up with due process, like slip something out of the court record, a whole chain of events happens and the fraud never rectifies itself, I believe, until people can sit down eyeball to eyeball and say, we've got a problem here and it's going to affect all of us, and it behooves all of us to work on it together. I mean, I would like to think I've matured through the years so I can get over my trauma, my hurt, and my pain of all that's been taken because of what George just read. On first blush, it seems, well, these judges are, kind of, going along with the corporations, and you got to bail out the banks and you got to take care of them. And I guess, it's inevitable damage that some of the farmers lose their farms. But, really, I asked somebody to pick me up a crate of oranges when they were in Florida. And, there's no friendly little orchard that you can get a crate of oranges. He would have had to go to Walmart. I said, forget it. In other words, the distributors are getting so huge, the factory farms are so huge, that what was going on in 96 and before, when these disgruntled farmers were trying to keep their farms out of foreclosure, we didn't pay attention then, and then 2008 came along, and if we don't stop these big media mega mergers, AT&T merging with Time Warner and then Verizon, we're going to have a mess on our hands. So in our little way, just by paying attention to what public access really is, I believe it would behoove the court to straighten it out. So here's my letter. Thank you for your letter of May 7th, which included a letter to me and my husband dated October 10th, 2017, a letter with many pages of our returned paperwork Joe and I never received last fall. All we received from you last fall by U.S. mail was a certified letter sent to both me and my husband, return receipt requested, which we sent back because our mailman signed it without our permission. The letter we returned was only a light envelope and could not have included all the paperwork you sent May 7th, 2018, received May 14th. Therefore, in your apparently backdated letter of October 10th, 2017, you say that you were directed by the 3 judges before whom the case was argued to return our paperwork, yet give no actual order, date, or venue, nor can I find any notations of such an order on the general docket, which you sent a few weeks before the May 7th, 2018 letter, wherein I was listed as an intervener. So what I sent her was April 18th. She just sent it back. It was stamped that the court had received it, but there was no explanation. She sent it back along with the general docket and then some of the arguments of the 3 judges. And it looked like what she sent back was saying that the appeals court is sending it back again to the lower court. That would be Judge Pauly's court, where Lydia Radin was nearly beaten to death on January 28th, 2016. And on this general docket, I was listed as an intervener. So you'd think, oh, great, they finally accepted me as an intervener. But you can see it's all a bunch of smoke and mirrors, so you keep your eye on the ball. As you remember, my April 18th letter noted that my as yet unreturned paperwork of September 20th, that's the one where you have the proof of service, 2017, was not on the general docket. So I was asking her on April 18th, I said, you're saying that I'm an intervener. I see my name up there with Dee Dee Halleck and M&N in the city. But when I look on the general docket, I don't see the paperwork that would come, there was a certain space, where some months had passed, was not on the general docket. Now, here's an interesting sentence. Is a general docket only a part of a public docket to which I am being denied access? If so, why am I being denied access to the public record? So you see what I mean? At first you think that the public docket is something that everybody in the public can see. But what if What if IP address discrimination actually sequesters you away? It's like having a bully on the highway. He's not letting you get on the on-ramp because you're called a terrorist or a sovereign citizen or whatever, the label might be to justify restricting your access. That's why in what you just read, I took notes on it, on, what was her name, June or...
Yeah, June.
June.
Wisniewski.
Yeah, and what she pointed out was you can write to the Southern Justice Institute or a couple of these organizations who are applying for federal funding and say, I don't know about, paying money to get judges to work against the common law when the Constitution's based on common law and all of that. But they have to make it available because that's the justification for the money that they're giving out. So I went to our Woodstock Library and I asked for the American Judges Association's court review. It's like a magazine, the AJA. And then I asked for a tape that June mentions in what George just read, Impact of the Common Law Movement on the Courts. That's the National Center for the State Courts. And then she also mentions the National Judicial College. She says that the National Center for the State Courts, NCSC, and the NJC, the National Judicial College, she finds to be the most threatening to the public's welfare. So, again, public access seems to be what it's all about, whether you're talking about the town board meetings, because I hitchhike, and today I was picked up by somebody that says she doesn't watch public access anymore because the town board meetings are no longer streaming live. They're no longer streaming live. So that means that when we put on rotation a DVD and you can see it, it's not live anymore. And as George and I can vouchsafe some weeks back, and I will document it and send it off to Time Warner Spectrum and Central Hudson, because when I called up, remember when the power went down maybe a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago?
Yeah.
The only thing that was working was the rotation DVD player. We had 2 live producers in the studio, and we couldn't get a message out. That's what emergency broadcasting is all about. So you should have a live stream for government. Yes, let the government channel have its live stream. Let the public channel be live stream. And let the educational channel be live stream. Let those 3 channels stream out live and let the public decide which one they want to be on. And if you have a lot of extra time, then, have boards watch over that and let other people beyond. People in the community even open it up to anywhere in the world. Now we're all connected with the world, as long as it doesn't step on the well-being of the living people in the community. And that's what I'm trying to say to Catherine O'Hagan-Wolf about straightening up the court of record here. You also mentioned that your court is in receipt of 2 proof of services signed by George Conant, received October 3rd, 2017. Yet, here again, I see nothing listed on the general docket you sent with my returned, without explanation, but stamped received paperwork. I am most eager to settle this case in the interest of public access and remind you that my notice of lien to Ruby Cradgick, Clerk of Court in the Southern District of New York, signed July 24, 2017, demonstrates a good faith effort to correct the false record at the lower court level. In other words, I'm not going after Ruby Cradgick's house and stuff because, I'm a greedy guts. I just want her to do her job and give me honest service. The untimely filing of pertinent documents is in violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 2076 and many others cited in our September 20th, 2017 letter to your court. Sincerely, Paula, Gloria, Barton. And then I'm waiting for Lydia Radin to give me all the oversight offices down in Washington, D.C., so that we get remedy. That's what common law is about. We want remedy.
Yeah.
So
that is what common law is about, is getting some remedy. And if you can't find a remedy in the law, you have the right, as a people of we the people, to create your own remedy and enforce it if the things are decided in your favor. Yeah, wow, my head's spinning a little bit from all of this. Being a self-presenting litigant in New York State and then reading this document here.
Makes more sense to you. I think you read it before, didn't you?
I've read it before, but, it's interesting that from, judge to judge, because we had this interesting thing that Judge Grossman, who started the civil case with us over the Christmas holiday,
flew the coop.
Was reassigned to Putnam County, is how the clerk put it to me. But, I mean, do judges take demotions lightly? Because he's taken a lesser post.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what Laura found out because she decided to look him up. And she found out the other day that he's no longer a Supreme Court justice with oversight of his department.
Well, you know what? That might really be to his sole credit. You know what I mean? He may have said, I don't want to go into this any further. I'm not going to keep pushing on innocent people.
Well, he was, neither Laura and I were happy by, being in the jaws of this situation to begin with, but we both really we got a good vibe from him that he seemed to be professional. He's a judge. He's a professional judge. He's an older guy. He's been doing it probably for 30 years, 40 years maybe, who knows. And he was a stickler for sticking by the book. And if you stick by the book, it's the Constitution at the end of the road.
But George, if he was really a stickler, it should have been defaulted by the clerk.
Which is why I think he left.
You had a default,
I think that's maybe a contributing reason to why he left, because there was a lot of shenanigans going on. Striking and dismissing my affidavit of truth and fact, ultimately I won that argument as it was just demonstrated in the last meeting with this new judge that I just had, which was that no, in fact, after I rebutted the judge's decision with an objection in writing, he left and now, and did not rule. And everybody had been telling me, oh, your stuff was thrown out, you don't have a chance, I said, he didn't rule. I looked it up online because now it is e-filed, so we have this instantaneous, game to play. And rulings weren't any. I said, sorry, my stuff is still standing. And the new judge said, basically, my stuff still stands, even though they're pretending to not understand it. Yeah, that was a good one. And they're also saying that they don't know what an affidavit is. Wow, really? So I said, well, there's a whole section devoted to the affidavit in this book that I have called the Practice of Law in New York State under the CPLR, Civil Practice Law Rules. Okay? So it's a handbook of how to use the CPLR, and I said I came when Judge Acker said to me that she didn't know what an affidavit was in this context, or I don't even think she said that. I think she just said she didn't know what an affidavit was. I was like shocked that she would make a statement like that on the record, by the way. Yeah. And I said, well, there's a very large, long section devoted to affidavits in the civil law books that I have, and I named the book. And then she said, well, are you using the 6th edition because you might be using the 3rd edition, or whatever. I'm like, oh my God, this is just absolutely crazy. So she has permitted the opposition in this instance now to redline at their will my claim and counterclaim. Now, she didn't say that they could redline my affidavit. But what's interesting about that document that they're redlining is it is one document. The affidavit of truth and fact and my claim and counterclaim are one document, and I swore to both of them. So that's one kind of an interesting problem. So, as the federal laws says, it is fatal. It is a fatal error for a judge or anyone to alter, redact, expunge, limit in any way a person's affidavit.
Yeah, think about it.
So she's breaking the law. Sorry, Judge Acker, but it's pretty clear. Now, Lydia Radin has just sent some documentation to me last night or the night before. I haven't read it all the way through yet, but the gist of it is that there's a whole bunch of rulings that say that even a New York State Supreme Court civil case in a civil court is controlled by constitutional law, and rulings, Supreme Court rulings, federal Supreme Court rulings. So her argument that, an affidavit of truth and fact, which actually under the CPLR is an appropriate tool to present factual support for a claim. So my affidavit was supporting my claim, and they're pretending that they don't have to answer it with an affidavit to rebut it, which they've timed out long ago. They've had, it's done. They've defaulted. They're ignoring. They're saying that the default is moot. They're trying to say that my affidavit is scandalous. I'm reporting scandalous behavior, but we didn't do it. I'm just reporting
We're
it.
the victims.
We're the victims of it. And so, we have a real kind of a strange unfolding here. And I can't help but think that this new judge has been secretly trained to resist arguments based on the Constitution.
She's gone to some of those seminars?
Either that or she's reading the manuals.
Yeah. What's going to be interesting is to see if the Woodstock Library is going to give me this, or if they're going to be going by some kind of credit rating,
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? IP ad, which is what my problem has been. That if you know people in the community, it's the ridiculous thing about showing state ID to get in the TV studio, when Clayton has known us for years, and known Joe for probably ever since Joe's been here for 40 years.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Those technicalities.
Right.
We'll see. Stand
by.
by.
All right. So we're in our last eight or 9 minutes here, and I got an email from Steve Romine about kind of an emergency situation. I haven't had a chance to call our building inspector in town here, Ellen. Another bomb here to fight off here, folks. So it seems as though Sprint Corporation, the telecommunications people, Sprint, right? Everybody knows about them. They're kind of a lesser player than AT&T and Verizon. Have applied for I don't know what kind of permit, because it's a building inspector involved, is pushing to allow Sprint to bring in their infrastructure for 5G.
Right.
And they're trying to make a end run, shall we say, around the planning and zoning boards of Woodstock to quietly get the 5G into our community, whether we like it or not. Now, at this point, it's secretly. And somebody tipped Steve Romine off, and now we're exposing it for you.
You know why it's Sprint? Because Sprint is worth... It's so small relative to AT&T and Time Warner and the big mega guys, that they're sort of, I think, just a theory, that they're throwing Sprint to the wolves to see
what happens.
If we can pull our act together, shake off all of our PTS from being dragged into courts and, forgive and say, Bill McKenna and Clayton and, Joe and I have liens on Jackie Early, Clayton Keith, and Bill McKenna. Let's take these liens off and let's work together and let's make this a really great community. And whatever little crumbs that Sprint is offering for this 5G, just say no. Like just say no to drugs. Remember that? Just say no. It's an addiction. And it's not healthy, it's harmful, the community is not prosperous, but I'm working with John Albanese. I'm ever optimistic that we can get frequencies that are more biologically compatible. We certainly don't need the weaponized towers and so on, but we for sure need a better dialogue. So
unless we have diagnostic equipment to measure what's in our airspace, they could be, microwaving us with anything, any kind of wavelength, whether it's a long wave or short wave. They used to have this thing called Shortwave Radio, and the Shortwave Radio is a very popular hobbyist kind of thing, and they can listen to people from all around the world because these short waves have a property of bouncing off the ionosphere, so that they get transmission that way. But but the kinds of things that we're talking about now are millimeter waves, really fast oscillations here, and these are approaching things like X-rays, gamma rays, ultraviolet. When you start talking about these kinds of oscillations at such fast repetitions, they're very dangerous to biological systems, and the most easiest way to explain this is your microwave oven operates with the same radiological technology as radars. All right, your radar is out there and it puts these microwave transmissions into the atmosphere, and if there's an airplane or something, a target out there, 10 miles away or whatever the range is of these things, it sends back an echo, and that's what they measure, and that's how they locate something in the airspace. However, though, that radar energy is also known to be extremely violent on biological tissues. Okay, so the principle of a microwave oven is the same thing. It just takes that microwave energy and it gets the water molecules to spin inside whatever the food is. And most of what we eat is composed of some amount of water, in some cases a lot of it, in some cases not much, depending on what the food item is. And it creates heat from that excitation of the water molecules. Well, our children's brains are being microwaved because the schools themselves are now the oven, and the microwave emitters are all the Wi-Fi emitters. And when you get into this 5G stuff, now you're talking a very highly excitable state of energy. And you don't need a lot of it to cause harmful effects in terms of power output. So we're winding down, and that hour went so fast I didn't even get to put up some of our YouTube stuff that we were going to play with, because we actually got it to work. It looks like there's a new browser on there that's compatible. So hopefully next week.
Is there one for the last minutes?
Well, let's see. I don't know. Oppenheimer Ranch, about a day ago, had an interesting photograph of the fresh 5 feet of snow in Wyoming that they're trying to clear the roads.
What was that guy, MM?
Oh, Mr. Yeah, the tab is there. It's the first tab.
Oh, no, I closed it, that's why.
Oh.
MM.
Mr. MBBB, or BB333.
Okay, BB333.
Yeah, sure.
And you wanted...
Well, if you put it on screen here, I can. Yeah, let's do that. There you go.
Hurricane...
Yeah, let's look at that. Let's just something to see here.
Guys, let's talk about hurricanes here real quick before we get the day started.
It's pretty interesting.
There's a very unique situation unfolding
here.
over in the Arabian Sea. There's another tropical cyclone coming on the heels of a record-setting tropical cyclone that made landfall going through the Gulf of Aden into Somalia. It was the largest cyclone ever recorded, and this was within the last week. Now we have another one out here in the Arabian Sea that's about to intensify and could itself be a record setter. Here it is, you can see at the Weather Underground. This is a radar image of the storm. It's called Tropical Cyclone 2A, and it's a threat to Oman and Yemen. And this, too, is an unprecedented system. We're starting to see these systems pick up more and more as we are closely approaching hurricane season. But these are in not typical places for hurricanes or cyclones. Not typical at all. In fact, the one that hit Somalia over the weekend, it was named Tropical Cyclone Sagar. It was the strongest tropical storm ever recorded in Somalia. Now we have yet another one on the heels of that one. So quite an unprecedented situation.
Yeah,
and again, that's up here in the North Arabian Sea on the east side.
All right, so that's going on right now, and that Mr. MBB333 has a website with lots of space weather news on it, all kinds of tabs and buttons that you can look at. I really recommend you go check out his YouTube videos. I'm not meaning to steal his content or anything like that. I'm doing that to educate our public. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on out there. Now, if anybody knows anything about the Horn of Africa and Ethiopia and Somalia and all those places, they haven't had rain because of, I would say, geoengineering amongst other factors for a very long time. They really had the starvation is crisis proportions over there. And I find it interesting that these huge storms are ramping up in the Arabian Sea and making landfall in these really desperate places. Lots of strange weather phenomena going on. Maybe next week we'll have opportunity to go through that, and I'll have a nice presentation about it. I'd like to thank Paula, Gloria, Barton again for teching for me and helping make a seamless show. And it is noted here that the cameras seem to be working better and that things seem to be going a little smoother since we complained so much. And that's a little shout out to the town board. Credit where credit's due. And so thank you for that. And you all have a good week. And see you next Wednesday.